Hello and welcome to Business Today Television, India Today Group. I'm Karishma Asudani, and joining me today is Mike Hayes, Climate Change and Decarbonization Leader, Global Head of Renewable Energy, KPMG in Ireland. And also joining me is Anvesha Thakker, Partner and Head of Renewables, KPMG in India. Thank you very much for joining us on this conversation. I understand quite a hectic day for you with all the discussions and deliberations down there. But let me begin with you, Mike, and I'm going to actually address the elephant in the room, which is the geopolitical situation today, which has also made energy transition quite politicized. Amidst all this, how do you see global climate goals faring well?
Well, to be honest, I'm very concerned about climate goals. There's no doubt that the whole geopolitical situation has changed fundamentally in the last 12 to 18 months, not just in the US, but across Europe. The switch from climate funding to defence funding. And what's actually happening is that corporations and countries are starting to rethink their climate goals, partially because of the geopolitical situation, but also partially because achieving these goals is proving to be more difficult than we originally thought. So we are going through a period where climate goals are being re-examined, reconsidered. We're leading up to COP30 in Belém in Brazil later in November, and I'm hoping that that's going to give us the impetus to really get back on track and focus again on ambitious climate goals, because that is what is needed most of all.
Okay, right. All eyes on COP30, where probably the discussions could pave a way part for the future. Anvesha, that brings me to the India's picture and India's role in this. We have had a strong commitment for our 2030 goals. Are we on track? Because we do see some delay and I'd say hindrance in terms of consensus when it comes to the global goals.
See, I think for India, it's not so much about global headwinds, because frankly, we need the capacity numbers not to only meet our climate commitments. It's the question of meeting the energy needs of the fastest growing, country of this size in the world. And to make that happen, where does the energy come from? It has to come from renewables if we want to make it cost effective, and also if we want to protect our country from global, supply shocks, and therefore the energy security part of it. So it has to be done. I think the focus should not be on capacity and getting to the targets. The focus has to be on implementation and making sure it happens. And there, I would say the headwinds are more local than global, because it's more about, how Mike said at the beginning of the day, that how does financing really come in? And are the global headwinds going to, kind of impact financing? Although we do have a very, very deep capital market, and renewables is something that is fairly mature, and financiers are comfortable with it, but we do need to finance other newer kids on the block like hydrogen and storage. So I think that the financing sector still needs to come, wrap their arms around some of these newer technologies. So that will be one challenge. And second is to get our transmission or the renewable energy, for the renewable energy integration, the transmission or the network implementation right. The planning is there. There's a huge capacity build out that's planned. Almost $100 billion of investment is going in. It's all under TBCB or the private sector mode. So there is, and it's almost assured returns that investors get. So there is a lot of appetite for something like that. But again, it has to happen, right? Which means your right-of-ways, your clearances, your approvals, your permits, all of these need to come in. And finally, I think to get the story right, make sure that whatever we do it optimally. And that's where the technology or the digital part of it to optimize what we are doing needs to come in. So I would say that we need to focus on these aspects rather than really worrying about the global headwinds.
You did talk about the local headwinds, and are you hinting at any kind of regulatory hindrances?
No, I don't think there are any regulatory hindrances per se, but like I said, to make all of this happen, we need to bring in the new technologies as well, like green hydrogen, for instance, the storage part of it over there. And what I see is that offtake, especially on the green hydrogen side, and for storage, when you're combining it with renewables, it's making renewables more expensive. So there are delays there on signing of PPAs when it comes to round-the-clock power, all of those solutions which are basically integrating storage. So the headwinds is more in terms of just making sure that what we do is cost effective. Because if we bring down the cost, automatically the offtake would be there on both the sides, whether it is hydrogen or whether it is storage. And these are the technologies that are needed to kind of put the final wrapping on all the commitments, that we have made.
Okay. Mike, from a global perspective, tell me, how do you draw an analogy on all of this with the use of AI? How can that help countries?
Well, AI and energy has become one of the hottest topics that we all talk about, and we talk about it in a negative way. People talk about all these data centers that are being built, and we've seen nothing yet in terms of the growth in data centers. And people talk about the fact that we're using oil, coal, natural gas to power these data centers, and the impact of it, the impact all of that has on emissions. However, that's not the real story. The real story is actually much more nuanced and actually much more positive. So first of all, AI is having unbelievable benefits on the climate agenda. We're using AI in a multitude of different ways to help us cut emissions. That's the first point. But the second point is the demand for energy is becoming so great and so fundamental that what it's actually doing, it's catalyzing the newer energy transition technologies, geothermal, biomethane, nuclear. And on top of that, you spoke to Anvesha about sort of the policy barriers. In fact, I'm now seeing governments going out of their way to try to facilitate renewable energy, because they recognize that if they cannot deliver on the energy needs to data centers and to the AI industry, they're going to lose that business. So actually, it's a much more positive story that I'm literally spent the last 12 months preaching this message that AI is good for the energy transition and it's good for climate action.
Great. You did talk about businesses, and Anvesha, I want to bring you in. Do you, and with your interactions across major energy players in India, do you see them having the appetite to being able to adapt to AI when they are working on the energy transition mechanisms?
So I'm very happy to say that I think there is a lot of curiosity and I would say acceptance that's growing for AI. Although I do see corporates sitting on the edge, and I often wonder why, because there are only benefits, and if you look at it, because AI is all about value realization. So what you spend on implementing AI, you're going to get multiples of it back in terms of your revenue, enhancement, your cost optimization, optimization of penalties, which comes in from being able to not kind of generate, do your generation forecasting and scheduling. So I see that there is such tremendous use of AI across the value chain, right from when you identify land, you do your siting of your renewables, to looking at your construction, monitoring it in these remote sites, looking at how much of carbon is actually going in to meet the ESG norms, to even things like bid advisory, bid planning your configurations and optimizing it, to monitoring, to governance, to operations enhancement, using predictive analytics and so on and so forth. There is so much that AI can bring, but I think corporates are kind of on the fence, but I feel that it's just a matter of a few months. And once, a few companies do start adopting it, there will be a big rush for this kind of technology.
Very interesting. Mike, one last question before we end this interview, and this is more on how the trade in energy flows has been dynamically fluctuating across because of involvement of, say, US, China, Russia, and now India. Would you agree that this has all kept the renewable energy space or the green energy a bit overlooked?
Well, yes and no, because again, maybe I'm a very positive and optimistic person, but two things have risen to the fore because of all of these, again, geopolitical issues, energy trading issues, and that is energy security and independence. And they're two different things. Energy security means if I'm a government in a country, wherever, I want to know that I've got access to energy for my people, first thing. But secondly, because of some of these geopolitical issues, energy independence on top of security has now become paramount. And governments are now figuring out one thing: what is the one source of energy that can help achieve both security and independence? It's renewables, because you're not dependent on finding a source of energy like discovering oil or gas. Renewables is everywhere. And actually, this whole shift towards the focus on energy security and independence, again, I think it's going to be a real positive for renewable energy. And I think that's what's started to happen. And the other dimension in all of this is affordability. You know, this idea that we can just decide that we can only rely on a certain forms of energy, that's not going to work. Ultimately, we'll come back to the consumer and what they pay for energy. And we're going to need all energy sources, particularly going back to your previous question, because demand is going to become so exponential because of AI. Increased demand, less supply means prices go up. So we have to get the supply side of it right. The only way we're going to achieve that is through renewables.
Great. Thank you very much for speaking with us on Business Today.
Our pleasure. Thank you.